Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a really close look at the forces, both historical and, well, very current, that are shaping Black cultural spaces across America.
Yeah, we're talking about everything from, historic neighborhoods and theaters to community hubs, even university programs.
And we've got quite a stack of sources here. They trace the challenges these communities are up against, starting way back, mid-20th century federal surveillance, right up to, well, legislative changes happening now in 2025. So our mission today is pretty straightforward. We want to analyze these layers of challenge, understand the sort of mechanisms of control being used,
Right.
but critically also highlight the resilience, the powerful resistance you see bubbling up in response.
Absolutely, because these cultural spaces, they're not just buildings or programs. They're vital symbols of autonomy, of creativity, fighting back against, frankly, systematic efforts to stifle Black identity.
It's this story of constant pressure and constant pushback. It really shows the persistence of these efforts to control where Black people gather, organize, create.
Exactly. Long history there.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really get a grip on the squeeze these spaces are feeling today, you absolutely have to start with the history.
No question.
Specifically, that history of government attempts to, well, delegitimize these movements from the start.
Precisely. When you look at current policy debates, you have to see them through the lens of these historical systemic attempts at erasure. And nothing really illustrates this quite like the FBI's COINTELPRO initiative.
COINTELPRO, we hear the name a lot, but what did it actually mean on the ground, this mission to disrupt and discredit?
It was essentially psychological warfare, designed to dismantle Black political power structures, cultural ones too. The goal, quite explicitly stated in documents, was to infiltrate, discredit, and disrupt groups like the CLC.
Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
Right, and the Black Panther Party, key organizations in the civil rights struggle.
So it wasn't just listening in on phone calls?
Oh, far beyond that. The sources detail really active measures, things like sending anonymous letters filled with calculated misinformation, trying to fracture leadership from within,
Wow.
orchestrating false flag operations to create conflict between different groups, even deliberately interfering with mail to stop fundraising. And they went after leaders, specifically Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X.
The impact must have been just devastating.
It was. By painting these legitimate, often peaceful movements as somehow inherently violent or subversive, the government effectively marginalized their claims for justice.
And created this lasting societal stigma, didn't it? That Black cultural expression, Black political organizing, it's somehow dangerous or threatening.
That stigma, unfortunately, has proven incredibly durable. And to really grasp the precedent for this kind of systemic destruction, you have to go back even further. Think about events like the Tulsa Massacre in 1921.
Greenwood, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street, just an incredible hub of Black success, culture, economic power, systematically destroyed out of racial hatred and, importantly, economic jealousy.
And that's the crucial link, isn't it? Tulsa shows this lineage of oppression. It wasn't just about violence. It was about destroying the ability of Black communities to build wealth, to create self-sustaining cultural centers.
So that pattern echoes today.
It really does. The methods shift, maybe from direct physical destruction to undermining cultural and intellectual spaces through laws, through policy, through policing practices. But the goal, it still feels like it's about controlling autonomy.
That connection controlling both physical and intellectual autonomy,
Right.
it perfectly sets the stage for what we're seeing right now. And here's where it gets really interesting, looking at these recent legislative shifts, the ones often being called the squeeze.
Yeah, our report shows some significant policy changes kicking off around early 2025. A real shift in approach you can see across different states and at the federal level, too. The first big one, the most publicized perhaps, is this push to dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, DEI.
Right, DDI. The rationale we're seeing cited in the sources, it often revolves around the idea, from some lawmakers' perspective, that these programs might have actually caused division, not unity.
That's the argument presented.
So what's the practical outcome when that belief turns into policy?
Well, the result is executive orders limiting the scope and, critically, the funding for DEI programs, particularly hitting education and federal hiring hard. And this creates what experts call a chilling effect. Practically, that means people self-censor. Faculty, employees, they pull back.
Yeah.
Resources for Black studies, for anti-racism training, they get withdrawn. Those specialized diversity staff roles eliminated. It actually puts the enforcement of civil rights protections in jeopardy.
It's like a systemic withdrawal of support from within the institutions themselves. And it's not just happening to agency level, right? It's hitting educational content directly.
Yeah.
Book bans, curriculum restrictions.
The data there is pretty alarming. Reports from PEN America show a really marked and targeted increase in book removals. And a significant chunk of those are books by Black authors or dealing with race.
And the American Library Association backs this up.
They do. The ALA reinforces the point that this kind of widespread censorship, it fundamentally ignores why inclusivity in education is necessary in the first place.
But let's break that down. What's the actual consequence for a student? Why should you care if one specific book gets pulled from a library shelf?
It's really about access to identity, access to critical thinking.
Yeah.
When authentic Black experiences history identity, when that's systematically scrubbed from the curriculum, it just reinforces historical exclusion.
Right.
For Black students seeing themselves reflected or not seeing themselves, that lack of representation can really amplify feelings of alienation. And for all students, it robs them of the chance to engage with critical discussions they need to understand the world they live in.
Yeah. Okay, so beyond the classroom, we're also seeing restrictions that impact activism itself. These anti-protest bills popping up in state houses, especially a surge in 2025.
Yeah, that's another major pressure point. The sources detail specific measures clearly designed to deter public demonstration, public engagement.
Like what kind of measures?
Well, imposing really strict rules on where and how people can protest, sometimes requiring organizers to get massive insurance policies they just can't afford, increasing criminal penalties for even minor infractions during a protest, and generally heightening police presence at rallies.
Which directly undermines the historical role of protest, doesn't it? Especially for Black communities. Thinking about the civil rights movement, Black Lives Matter.
Right.
Protest has been a necessary tool for challenging injustice when institutions won't listen.
Exactly. By ramping up the personal risk, the financial cost, these laws create this hostile legal climate.
Right.
It actively stifles the ability of cultural spaces themselves to function as hubs for organizing against discrimination.
And then finally, there's this complex issue around campus clampdowns. These new executive orders, investigations related to anti-Semitism in universities.
Yeah, this is a really tricky intersection because what happens is university funding often gets tied to complying with these very specific government guidelines.
Right.
Now, the stated aim is combating anti-Semitism, which is vital. But the unintended consequence, as many academic leaders are warning, is an environment where discussions about other marginalized groups, including race, intersectionality, get curbed or approached with extreme caution.
So the fear of losing federal money, or big endowments, it deters universities from fully engaging with essential topics, constraining Black scholarship, Black cultural dialogue on campus.
That seems to be the concern, yes. It creates this kind of cautious, maybe even fearful atmosphere. So you look at the whole picture. It's a sweeping set of maneuvers.
Yeah.
From historical surveillance and economic destruction to restricting what gets taught, how people can protest, and even what can be openly discussed on campus.
It's a lot.
It is. And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, this sustained, multi-layered pressure, it raises a really important question. How are communities actually managing to respond? How are they organizing and, frankly, surviving this cultural squeeze?
Before we dive into that resistance, maybe let's just ground ourselves in the climate they're pushing back against.
Yeah.
The reality of hate crimes. What are the latest stats telling us?
Okay, so looking at the most recent available data, which is generally from 2022 from the FBI and civil rights groups, it's a picture that needs nuance.
Okay.
On one hand, we did see a slight decrease in the overall number of reported hate crimes that year, which, on the surface seems like a positive trend.
There's always a but with these numbers, isn't there?
There usually is. Despite that small overall drop, hate crimes targeting Black individuals still make up a hugely disproportionate share of the total. And these aren't minor incidents. They're overwhelmingly violent crimes, rooted in these deep, long-standing prejudices. Plus, you have the consensus among civil rights organizations that most hate incidents actually go unreported.
Or they get misclassified by police.
Exactly. So, while the reported number might dip slightly, the actual level of threat, the vigilance needed, it remains extremely high.
So that constant underlying threat combined with this legislative squeeze we've been talking about, That's precisely why these grassroots movements become so essential, right? They become the first responders in a way.
Absolutely. Their strength often lies in that hyperlocal community solidarity and, crucially, a refusal to just wait around for institutional help that might never come.
Mm-hmm.
So you see them mobilizing their own constituents, running campaigns to save historic sites that developers might want to tear down or gentrify,
Yeah.
actively supporting local artists through things like mutual aid, setting up new independent community centers focused purely on Black culture.
Are there specific examples of that kind of tangible action, things we can point to?
Definitely. Some initiatives that grew out of movements like Black Lives Matter, for instance, have led to direct action, like creating community land trusts.
Okay, what's that?
Basically, community groups pooling resources to buy property, specifically to protect vulnerable cultural neighborhoods from being bought out and changed by outside development.
Ah, I see. Taking ownership.
Exactly. And they're smart about using technology, too. Social media, online advocacy campaigns,
Mm-hmm.
they use these tools to map endangered cultural sites, to really amplify the argument for policies that promote genuine inclusivity and diversity operating outside those government-controlled DEI budgets that are being cut.
It's that persistence, that creativity,
Oh,
often happening outside or even in direct opposition to the mainstream institutions. That really stands out as a testament to their resilience, doesn't it?
it really does. It reminds you of the sheer tenacity of communities like Greenwood. A century ago, after that horrific massacre, their first instinct was to rebuild, to restore their cultural identity.
Yeah.
These grassroots efforts today, they're not just about preserving the past. They're ensuring heritage survives while actively nurturing a new wave of creative expression on their own terms.
So putting this all together, from COINTELPRO's shadow to the 2025 screes, what does this all really mean for the future? For Black culture, for advocacy?
Well, the future looks like it's intricately tied to two things: policy reform that actually supports these grassroots efforts, and sustained community engagement that values them.
Okay, policy reform like what?
Given the economic pressures we talked about, we need policies specifically aimed at supporting Black-owned cultural businesses and institutions. Things like dedicated public funding streams, maybe tailored tax incentives, grants that are easier to access, bypassing some of the usual bureaucratic hurdles.
And on the individual level, for people listener.
Advocacy is key. Our sources really emphasize that everyday support matters. Showing up for those local cultural events and festivals, actively supporting local artists, buying their work, promoting it, championing Black literature and scholarship in your own circles.
Not just when it's trending online, but consistently?
Exactly. Consistently. Ultimately, the path forward, it seems, really requires a collaborative effort, where Black culture isn't just seen as some niche segment of public life that needs protecting,
Mm-hmm.
but is truly treated as a dynamic, integral part of the whole societal fabric, a source of resilience, innovation, creativity, something that strengthens the entire community, and its repression that diminishes all of us.
That's a really powerful point to end on. You know, if you want to keep thinking about this, may consider the idea of cultural wealth, that collective knowledge, the resources, the history held within a community. If these legislative moves aim to shrink Black cultural spaces, are they just targeting expression? Or is the deeper target maybe the accumulation, the transmission of that critical, independent cultural wealth? Something to mull over until our next deep dive.